Okay, so the reason we're talking about this is because it's been talked about everywhere else that I'm like, okay, there's no way we can get by without making a video about this topic here. Now, the past few days we have been chronicling different conversations talking about Matthew Tkachuk, former Calgary Flames superstar, current Florida Panthers superstar, and the trade which sent him all the way down there to Sunrise. However, we have not been focusing all too much on some of the players that were included in the return. Cole Schwindt, a first-round pick, Mackenzie Weegar, Jonathan Huberdeau, these were some incredible names getting thrown in there in a package that eventually was sent over to Calgary. However, most of the videos we've made over the past few days have highlighted pretty much Tkachuk and Tkachuk alone. That changes with the conversation in today's video, as we talk about the other 100-point guy that was swapped around in this trade, a guy that had the same amount of points as Johnny Gaudreau this previous season, but who did it in 2 fewer games played, former Florida Panther superstar and current Calgary Flames superstar, Jonathan Huberdeau. Now, we've already talked about Huberdeau in the past. We recently made a video talking about the Capo-Caco comparisons that were made by NBC back in 2019. That video chronicles the link between these two, stylistic-wise at least, and we talk about Huberdeau and the career he's built for himself. Long story short, he is a very good hockey player. He had 115 points last season in 80 games played, and he's only making $5.9 million a season. Now, the last season of that contract is actually this upcoming year, 2022-2023, which means that the Florida Panthers did not really have themselves all too much of a guarantee that they would have been able to keep Jonathan Huberdeau, and thus you saw a trade wherein he got sent over to Calgary in this Matthew Tkachuk swap. However, because Huberdeau is an upcoming free agent, conversations are swirling as to whether or not we're going to have the same conversation that we had with Gaudreau and Tkachuk this year with Huberdeau next year. Because, let's face it, these guys are all superstar caliber players playing in Calgary. They're all 100-point players, and this season, the Flames lost out on Tkachuk and Gaudreau. So what happens next year when Huberdeau is also playing for Calgary, and he's also going to have to go through this extension process? Is he even going to want to stick around? There is an entire sentiment going around saying that, hey, if the Calgary Flames are not great in 2022-2023, you're going to have Brad Treliving absolutely get assets in return by trading Huberdeau away as a rental for any other playoff team that's looking to pay the price. You saw Claude Giroux earlier in this year's offseason, or not offseason, the trade deadline get sent over from Philadelphia to Florida. That netted the Flyers a whole bunch of assets. I still don't think the amount of assets that they got from Florida was equivalent to the value that Claude Giroux has served for the Flyers, but either way, it was still a pretty okay haul. With Huberdeau being a UFA next year, though, and the fact that he's only making $5.9 million after being a 100-point player, it makes it so that any team that's going to go out there and sign this guy next season, whether or not that's Calgary or some other squad in there, they're going to have to pay a very big price. But we have some speculation as to whether or not that team could be one that we've all been familiar with the past few days due to other trade rumors and other free agent conversations as well. Let's talk today about Jonathan Huberdeau and the Montreal Canadiens, because it's been a floating idea around social media that says that, hey, Huberdeau might actually want to come back to Montreal. Because, let's face it, I mean, the guy's name is Jonathan Huberdeau. He is from Quebec, and he's a player that, if you go over to some previous articles we have seen, has been documented on the record to saying that he would like to play for the Canadiens in the future. This is an article from journaldemontreal.com from, when is this? 2021, April 18th. Jonathan Huberdeau sees himself with the Habs. Forward Jonathan Huberdeau still cherishes the dream of wearing the Montreal Canadiens uniform. This article was published in French, but I translated it to English via the Google machine, so go ahead and click the link in the description if you want to go ahead and read this. The Florida Panthers shared this information with the host Louis Champ and subscribers to the Club of 10 de la Fondation du Chum on Sunday. Asked whether or not he wanted to one day evolve into a big hockey market, the 27-year-old athlete allowed himself for a few seconds to imagine himself with the blue, white, and red sweater. Of course, you wonder if you'll be able to play for Montreal. It's a beautiful city, and that's where I come from. It has always been a dream for me to play in Montreal, explained the native of Saint Jerome. But Huberdeau quickly came back to reality. For now, I'm not trying to think about that. I'm in Florida and I'm having fun there. I would really like to participate in a championship-winning team in Florida before maybe going to Montreal. Now, we know that the Florida Panthers were the best team in the NHL last season, and even though they had themselves all the success, they still didn't do anything in the second round against the Tampa Bay Lightning, so that's kind of their bad. But for Jonathan Huberdeau, he is no longer in Florida. He is in another team in Calgary that, all things considered, is pretty good. You still have Elias Lindholm there, you still have Mangiapane there, you still have Tanev and Markstrom there, and you just added Mackenzie Weegar and Jonathan Huberdeau, so you still got yourselves a pretty good team, I would say. But it has been very publicly discussed by Huberdeau himself that yes, he would one day like to play for the Canadiens, and even though this is not the timeline we live in right now, it's still an idea that he's got floating around in there. In fact, this is a post on the Florida Panthers subreddit from yesterday, posted by the Briss22. Habs fan here. There seems to be a belief on this sub that Huberdeau wants to go to Montreal. Is this legit, or is it just another baseless rumor? Let's read some of the comments from Florida Panthers fans. Yeah, by the way, Florida Panthers, they have fans, and they are going out there and contributing to this discussion right here. Nikolai1993 says, I was always under the impression that he wanted to go back home at some point. Ethan Gaines07 says, we've heard the same, but who knows how true it is. Reports came out today stating that he wanted to re-sign with the Panthers and was blindsided by the trade. Who knows what's real and what's not. Dynamo Joe says, it's not baseless. Sorry, I can't point a link to it, but I remember reading an article that said he grew up a Habs fan, and when he was a kid, they would be in South Florida for the winter, and they'd always try to catch the annual New Year's Montreal, Florida game. He is on the record saying that he'd like to go home at some point in his career. The flip side is that it doesn't seem to fit into Montreal's plans in the short term. I don't know why they'd spend UFA money next summer for a 100-point scorer who will likely start to decline while the Habs are still in rebuild mode. Of course, they're interested, and he'd make the team better short and long term, but would they spend $10 million by 7 years for it? That is an interesting question, but the Briss22 replies saying, hey, money-wise, it won't be too much of an issue since Byron, Drew, and Dadonov, they're all expiring this season, and that's almost $15 million in cap space. Also, if Carey Price is retired and you have a Hoffman trade or something, there's going to be a lot more money available. But either way, the sentiment that Huberdeau doesn't really align with the prime careers of Caulfield, Suzuki, Slafkovsky, and them is a very good point. But at the same time, if the player wants to go to Montreal one day, and the Montreal Canadiens are there saying, hey, we have a lot of cap space at our hands, what do we do with it? You take the franchise superstar that is knocking on your door begging you to take him on. Heck, maybe even, best case scenario, Montreal pulls their cards and they're saying, hey, Dubois, come over here. We can make a trade with Kirby Doc or something. Huberdeau, come over here. We can sign you because we got a lot of money. And next year, not next year, 2-3 years down the line, you have a top six of Caulfield, Slafkovsky, Suzuki with Dubois, Gallagher, and Huberdeau, and things look fantastic heading into the next few seasons because you're going to have to sign Dubois long-term if you're going to acquire that guy, and you're going to have to sign Huberdeau long-term if you're going to acquire that guy too. So I thought I'd bring this topic up just because I've been seeing a lot of discourse going around in my Twitter feed as to whether or not Huberdeau will fit into the Canadiens' long-term plans because apparently he wants to play in Montreal. But either way, you can talk to me in the comments on your thoughts about this idea over here. Talk to me in the comments about the article, the comments that he made a few years ago. Okay, not a few years ago. It was a year and a bit ago where he said, yeah, I'd love to play for Montreal. It was always a dream for me to play in Montreal, etc., etc. So is this just another Quebec kid going out there and saying the same Montreal Canadiens fan service we've heard before, or is there more than meets the eye to this conversation? Florida Panthers fans on their own subreddit seem to think that there is more than meets the eye, but I want you to tell me in the comment section below if you are on board with that idea as well. Furthermore, if you're a fan of the Canadiens and you're like, hey, we should go after Huberdeau, what is the most amount of money you would be willing to pay this guy on a contract that starts in 2023-2024? This last season of 22-23 is really going to showcase a lot as to how much Huberdeau gets paid next year and beyond. So let's say he gets maybe 70, 80, 90 points. Let's say he gets 100, 110 points like you did this recent season. How much does that change the amount of money you'd be willing to give him, and why? Talk to me in the comments on your thoughts about Huberdeau and the Canadiens. I hope you enjoyed this video. Juraj 99, and bye.